I often wonder, when you're reading a really good and complicated thriller or horror book, you think, if my life depended on it, I couldn't figure out how to end this, or where it's going, or what's going to explain what's going on. Does anyone ever write that way, by writing themselves into a corner and then figuring out a way out, the way some magicians will decide what effect they want and then figure out a way to do it?
I always have to know where I'm going to end. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I have to at least have the end in mind. And then I sort of take a chance on being able to find my way there.
Yeah. Would Rosemary be an example of that? Did you?
Yeah,
was there some point in the middle where you didn't know what the resolution would be, or
no?
Or
I really couldn't get started on it until I knew that she was going to accept the baby at the end. But then I didn't much care about the middle because I figured I would take care of it when I got there, and I did.
Yeah.
But I couldn't start. I literally could not begin it, and I realized that it was because I wasn't sure how it was going to end. And once I made up my mind on that.
It seems like one thing that would separate the good from the bad, either in film or fiction, is obviously the ending. Is it a disappointment at the end, and you go, I've been had all along.
Well, again, that depends. As you say, if you know really where you're going. I think that, for example, the ending in The Birds was disappointing to a lot of people.
I didn't remember what the ending was.
They just sort of go out of the house and drive off to get Tippi Hedren to the hospital, and then there are birds all over the place, and they just sort of drive away. And a lot of people felt there was really no resolve to that until people started to dig into it a little bit and find out what the attitudes of the film were towards the whole idea of family and all that.
How did the story, isn't it from de Maupassant's story?
De Maupassant.
Or something like that? Du Maurier. I always get them confused. They look so much alike. Do you ever base your characters on real people, even relatives or friends?
I think that most writers, not just horror writers, do that to a degree, and I found myself in a lot of cases stewing together 2 or 3 people that I may have met or I may have seen to make a completely new character. It's a little bit like those flip books that my kids have, where you can make 1,000 different faces from 3 to series of segments. You know, the hairline and the eyes and the rest. So, and usually that works pretty well. And then every now and then you will see somebody that you don't know, and you'll just say, "What's this guy about?" And then the character becomes a kind of adventure as you try to figure out exactly who they are and what they're doing. Hitchcock was a great one at that. Wonderful character studies there in those films.
What about the erotic side of it? To some people, fear itself is an erotic stimulant.
I think there's an erotic subcurrent in most supernatural fiction, and then maybe some of the fear is a sexual fear.
Yeah.
But I don't think Stephen King has ever written a sex scene in a book. Have you? I don't remember any.
Well, I'm trying, Peter. I need more experience.
They're not.
There's an eroticism in Salem's Lot, I find.
Yeah.
I find.
But in a way.
But no Harold Robbins kind of.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
we
no,
were talking
no.
about Dracula earlier, and Dracula is a tremendously sexy book.
Yeah.
And of course, Salem's Lot came from my wife saying one night at supper, I was teaching that book in high school, and she said, "What do you suppose it would be like if Dracula came back today?" And it was one of those ideas that you'd forget about it for a while and it would pop back up. And one of the decisions that I made in that book pretty consciously was to use a little bit of that, but not to try and use that sexual subcurrent a lot, because I thought in a world where we've got not only the Penthouse Forum, but God help us, Penthouse Variations and every other thing, that in a way that might be an empty car now. That a lot of the sex that was in Dracula came from a repressed society of saying, this is okay, it's all right for this man to come into your bedroom and give you a hickey in the middle of the night because he's a vampire and you can't help yourself. It's okay.
Well, there are people who theorize that that repression and oppression are really at the root of all of the horror experience, totally, and relate it to very closely to a repressed sexual. I don't know whether you were saying before that some of the stuff that's been written about why horror is
it's pretty ludicrous,
goes over the edge.
Yeah.
But
How does this enter into the rating system of a film, whether it gets an R or...
Well,
does it ever get an X for...
Recently, the rating system as we presently know it has been rating violence as toughly, if you will, as they rate sex. Is
there a difference? So if two monsters cut each other's heads off, that would seem to be more okay than if two normal people do.
Well, I feel that it's more okay, or I don't feel that it's as traumatizing. I also happen to think that whether it be sex, violence, whatever, that they should be, well, rated is an unfortunate word, but maybe there should be at least information passed out to the audience which says this contains this, language, whatever. I think that unfortunately the rating system in this country, thank God it's something short of censorship, but it's confusing. X-rated as a phrase has entered our vocabulary as meaning sex or having a sexual connotation. And unfortunately, the X rating is not copyrighted. It's not a copyrighted trademark as the PG, the G, and the R are. So the X was kind of thrown out there for people who were making motel movies. Anybody can use it, and you're not infringing on anyone's copyright. So there are problems with the rating system and everything. But yes, they are Xing violence. Dawn of the Dead was probably would have been an X, but we went out without a rating, simply because we felt that it would have been confusing to put an X on a picture. We put information on all of the advertising material, which said this film is very violent and everything else, but we didn't want people to confuse it as having a sexual or a purely sexual content. It has no sex in it at all, actually. Overt sex.
No overt sex.
Maybe sex between monsters would be all right. Do you get weirdo mail?
Sex
between
Dracula.
monsters? Dracula has
Bride of Frankenstein.
Bride of Frankenstein, yeah.
But that doesn't come off. The two of them don't get along at all.
No.
She begins to scream when she sees him. And, it's true.
We all know how that feels.
Well, we always suspect that Dracula's off there with those women from the basement.
Yeah, but this is no pun intended. I don't want to go into this too deeply, but the sex in most vampire stories is all a kind of oral thing. It's all a kissing thing. In the novel, we have no idea that he's certainly a great lover. He almost seems dead from, let's say, the throat down.
Those parts were censored out back in that Victorian age that you were talking about.
I believe he has a mustache in the novel, which bothered me because I wanted to picture Bela Lugosi as I read it, and he never did.